Today's chapter will be chapter 10, Closing the Case. And if you're following along with your book at home, it's page 85, a section called Tom Lyden. My name is Dan Hennen. I'm joined here today with Greg Fernandez Jr., Catherine, and Sophia. Welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Hey everyone.
Well, it's a good chapter of the book where we're called Closing the Case, and it's kind of wrapping everything up. And this podcast episode will be very good because it features Tom Lyden, a local television broadcaster, investigator, one could call it, here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul Twin Cities area. And so what we'll do is start reading here on page 85, and we're going to find out how this all works and how it brings closure and how convenient it all seems to be. Continuing on. 1 year after the alleged double murder/suicide committed by David Crowley, Fox 9 investigator Tom Lyden interviewed Apple Valley Police Chief John Retzgeigel. I waited for Mr. Lyden to ask Chief Retzgeigel why it took his department 1 month to locate the bullet they believed David killed himself with. Eventually, I realized that was never going to happen. Should we end there, Greg, for discussion?
Sure. Yeah, so obviously, the case is closed. Everything is wrapping up. It's 1 year later. We're going to get some answers, right? Tom Lyden is going to come to our rescue. He's going to solve this case for us. He's going to let us know, as many people have been taunting us and saying, if you guys just look at the evidence, if you're just patient, if you just wait, you will see what proves David Crowley guilty. So here we are, watching Tom Lyden's news report here. It's about 20 minutes if anybody wants to go and see that. Just look for Tom Lyden, Fox 9, and you'll find it. We may play a little bit of that later here too. But so there were a lot of things that we were hoping for. Obviously, we want to know the answers. We want to know, okay, Chief, what did you guys find that was just a slam dunk, case closed, no problem, David Crowley guilty, public is not in any danger. And so one of the main things that I was waiting for Tom Lyden to ask him about was about some of the things, especially this bullet that they don't find until 1 month later, 1 month after David Crowley's body is found. And as I'm watching it, and I quickly realize, okay, you know what? He's never gonna ask the police chief that question. And I was really disappointed, and I'm sure that a lot of people were. The main reason that I was disappointed was because at this point, 1 year later, a lot of people don't even know about this bullet. And we're talking about item 57, the bullet that is quote-unquote tied to David. Not through his blood. The bullet does not have his blood. This is the bullet found in the living room attic, right above the living room. And so this was a big thing because I really felt if people know about this bullet, they're going to start asking more questions. They're going to start asking the right questions. And I was hoping that Tom Lyden would ask that right question. If they got it wrong, if they missed it, okay, you guys missed it. But it just seems like they didn't even want to talk about it. And Tom Lyden, who, looks, if you watch Tom Lyden's news report, he looks very serious, like he really cares. He's really intense. He's really gonna, he almost looks sincere, almost. But then his actions don't back up that view. He doesn't ask the real tough questions that a broadcast journalist, that a journalist should ask. He does not ask those questions. So I was really frustrated. Dan, how did you feel after you watched Tom Lyden's report?
Well, like you said, Greg, for the months that had gone past, more and more people were following this case, but it was getting more and more quiet at the same time. There wasn't any traction. But our communication, I think with the both of us, with emails back and forth from the Apple Valley Police Department, they said, we're almost done. We're ready to wrap up the report. We're ready to just release everything. We've come to the conclusion that this whole thing is going to be done. It's going to be sometime in January 2016 when we'll close this whole thing up. And so we were all excited that we're finally going to get the police reports and the information and what all happened, because before then we hadn't been getting much information. There was, of course, a lot of activity on the Justice for David Crowley Facebook group page about what was going on and whatnot, but what we kept getting responded with is, we can't say anything until everything's released. And then 1 week was led to 2 weeks, and 2 weeks, was 3 weeks. And finally, it was January 2016. They said, we've got this whole thing done. And then this Tom Lyden Fox 9 investigative report came out at the same time, which I don't think we were really expecting that. But after watching it, you are right, Greg. The questions that he asked were all softball questions, all very, very easy to answer questions. None of this was hard, difficult, or challenging, and it didn't bring up any of the very questionable things that we were dealing with. And so this kind of set everything in motion as far as going along with the official narrative. They were just trying to cement the official narrative, and it felt to me like an Operation Mockingbird cover up, that they asked the answers that they knew they'd have the answers to, and everything was softball questions. So I was very let down, to say the least. Should I continue?
How about you two ladies?
Sorry.
I'd like to see how did you two ladies feel about it once you watched this, or have you watched it? Do you have the patience to watch 20 minutes of Tom Lyden and his nonsense?
I don't know about Sophia, but I did watch that, and the whole thing. I have a very short span to deal with people who are just lying, and you could just tell either that Tom had not done really any research whatsoever, and in regard to this first paragraph, kind of what sticks out to me is that it seems to have gone over both Tom Lyden's head and the AVPD, that it took them a month, and then they had to be told. So they're trying to skip over this very important part of this case, and this, we'll mention it in passing, oh, by the way, and then quickly forget about it.
And just to follow up, this is Dan again. Locally here, Tom Lyden's been around for a while. The Fox 9 investigators have been around for a while. They've done some very good reporting in the past. They've done some very good investigative journalism in the past on normal type of crimes or questionable activities. But this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this, where it was just kind of blatant in your face that they didn't really care. It only left me leaving thinking that they don't have a clue what they were doing, or they were part of the cover-up to set the stage to walk lockstep with the official police narrative. And so that's the thing that let me down. Because they have very, I guess, high standards, so to say, or a big high following here in the Twin Cities. 3 of the big channels here, the network news, all have very good investigative groups that do this kind of thing. And so when this came out, I was looking forward to that, because I enjoy watching them myself. But boy, it seemed off. Something was not right about it. But they were very good to come off as very sincere, very let's break down this case and let's get to the root of it. And during this time too, I had a couple of voicemails left from Tom Lyden on my phone saying, we want to interview you, we want to get some of your thoughts on some of this to see how it all goes. And I'm glad that I refused and declined, because it came off once again as a hit piece, that we were the crazy conspiracy theorists, and it would have come off as a throwing us under the bus for questioning it, because it came off as very much a very official narrative. Police were right, all the research has been done, every stone has been overturned, nothing is left to miss, is how it came off.
Yeah, and for me, this was my first introduction into who Tom Lyden was, and just watching that, you know, if that's who he is and if that's the extent of what he does in his quote-unquote investigation, it's not impressive, and I would never watch anything he would ever do again. Whether he would do a great job on the next piece, the fact that he, for me, this is my opinion and how I see him, how he just kind of let ethics and truth kind of go out the window. And, you know, we've all kind of figured out by now that sometimes what we search for doesn't exactly always make us really happy. But we still present it. It's what it is. But it seems like Tom Lyden completely forgot that aspect. You know, I remember the days when I was growing up. I remember journalists in the 60s and early 70s. I mean, when they went and dug out a piece and they investigated something, they didn't care who was involved. They would get to the bottom of it. And nowadays it's like your opinion goes toward the most popular person and not the truth. And that's kind of how I see how Tom handled this. It went toward the popular view and not the truth of the matter.
Continuing on, authorities who entered the 1051 Ramsdale Drive on January 17th, 2015, did not notice a bullet hole in the living room ceiling during their, quote, thorough investigation. Within hours of finding the bodies, and after, quote, assessing the crime scene, Detective Jim Gummert assumed David Crowley was guilty. Yet he too missed the bullet hole in the living room ceiling. In fact, Detective Gummert could not remember the date when he saw the bullet hole. Is that truly a thorough investigation?
Yeah, I thought that was one of the most frustrating answers of the 21 questions that we asked Jim Gummert, that you can't remember the date when you saw the bullet hole. I believe the question was, you know, did you see the bullet hole and when? And the answer, of course, he said, yes, I saw it, which we all saw it. I mean, we've all seen the hole, but you don't remember when? I mean, that's frustrating. That's a very frustrating thing. So I wanted to make sure to add that in here.
And Greg, that's a very good point too, because like you said, the chief investigator here would remember things that they saw that were noteworthy, especially something of this magnitude. And so the answer would have been January 17th. They saw the bullet hole. Well, if it wasn't then, the only other time that they were there to see the bullet hole was February 18th. But it would have only been those 2 days would have been the answer. By him answering, I don't know or I don't remember, gives us all the answers we need to know, because he doesn't know, because he can't say the right answer. He can't say the truth.
Yep.
The truth is that he didn't see it until February 18th. Well, if he saw it February 18th, that's a month later, and it was not a thorough investigation. So his only option to craft his answer would be to say, I don't know or I don't remember, and that's exactly what he did. That is telling us all we need to know by that answer. A triple homicide on your watch, you would know the dates that you would have seen things. And so I'm glad you put that in the book, Greg. That's a huge red flag. Continuing on, this case needs to be reopened based solely on the conclusion provided by the Apple Valley Police Department and their lack of evidence to prove their theory. Their theory alleges that David Crowley, quote, snapped and killed his wife and daughter. Then David allegedly killed himself after leaving 3 messages in 3 separate areas of the house. The Apple Valley Police Chief believes David was the one who wrote, quote, Allahu Akbar at the top of the living room wall after killing his wife and daughter. Where is the evidence to support that belief? We're talking about Jim Gummert first, and he's the lead detective, or the sergeant. And this next paragraph talks about the police chief, which is Reitzeigel. So they are 2 different people. Now, the answers are very much similar, but it jumps over to the police chief in this following paragraph. Go ahead, Catherine.
Okay, it was right there where it says, the very last sentence of that paragraph, it says, then David allegedly killed himself after leaving 3 messages in 3 separate areas of the house. How often have they ever seen that happen? I mean, really? What person who's going to go around and commit suicide after they've committed double homicide is going to go to 3 separate rooms on 3 separate devices on 3 separate pieces of paper? None of that makes sense. Again, just like the bullet hole, this didn't even strike them as odd and not of that type of behavior or what they should expect to see. Like, they just glossed over it.
And this ties in very well with their allegation that David had all this extra time in the house. The killings took place, and then he had all this time to carry out these other things. And so that's how they're tying this together, by saying that he had time to go to all these different rooms. He had time to write on the walls. He had time to walk around barefoot in the blood. He had time to write on the computer. He had time to put together this song list called Ascent on his computer to play. And so all these things that they're saying are tying it all back together, that he was in the house for an extended period of time after the killings took place. And so I think that's why they're allowing themselves to believe all this, because they thought that there was all this extra time. Correct.
And then, then I would ask them, let's compare cases. And I know they have really nothing to do with each other, but in this regard, compare this with the Jean Benet Ramsey case and that supposed ransom note. Now, supposedly someone stayed in that house and wrote, a 3-page one? But see, now their supposed person took the time to write it all in one. Every suicide note is written on one source. Now, they're trying to say, David, so what, he decides to go to the office now? Okay, I'm going to go downstairs and sit in the office, and I'll just write, open the rise now, and then I'll just dot something here, and then I'll go up here on the computer and only leave 2 quote-unquote footprints right in front of the computer, and then I'll say, I've loved you all. Oh, wait a second. Okay, wait, that's not enough, so now I think I'll write on the wall. They don't seem to understand that I don't care how much time someone stays, if they're going to focus on a quote-unquote suicide note, it will be in one place. They're going to jot it all down at one time, not pick and choose and go here and go there. But again, it's beyond my comprehension as to how they're going that stretch and using that as their excuse.
Yeah, I mean, you would almost think they would be looking for you're looking at 3 different writings here. How do we know who did this? And I think that's the most simplest thing, as Catherine just articulated it so well. Who does that? When have you ever heard of a case that does that? I've heard of cases where there were 2 written notes. They're usually signed. Yep. Here you have 3 things. We don't know who did what. And it's 3 different types. One is in blood, one is in digital form, one is in writing. None of them are really suicide notes. And right. So it's crazy. Their whole, how do they not think that this is weird? And how does that not show evidence that maybe this was a homicide? Triple homicide, not a double suicide murder. What does that have to do with a double suicide murder? It's really odd.
Yeah, and so why would anyone, a person who's going to be committing suicide after committing this type of an atrocious crime, why would they not write their entire thoughts, again, in one place? Why are the thoughts separate? You have the Allahu Akbar on the wall, and then in another room, in another section of the house, you have submit to Allah now, which doesn't even make sense. And then in the area where they're all at, there's a note that says, I have loved you all with all of my heart. Really? Right there, I don't know. It's frustrating.
The police really don't even know who did what. Possibly David did the Submit to Allah Now, but there's no proof when that was written. They're just assuming. They can't date ink. So, I mean, it's all they know for certain is that he flipped through the note pages in that notebook because I think like a partial fingerprint is there. That's the only fingerprint that they found in the whole entire crime scene. But they don't find fingerprints or DNA on the blood wall. And they can't prove who typed on the computer and the laptop thing in the kitchen. So, I mean, they make a lot of assumptions.
And there's no proof if anything was done under duress.
Correct. So...
And of course, Tom Lyden doesn't address any of this.
Well, he doesn't have the integrity to. And that's what frustrates me the most about his 20-minute special was that he embellished on the evidence. When he talks about footprints, bloody footprints throughout the house, there were 2.5 bloody footprints, and they were in a little clump. Was that over by the island?
Yes.
So it's not through the house, but he led his audience to believe that. And, you know, it's just, if you have integrity, why are you going to embellish?
Agreed.
And then I think he was talking about fingerprints being on the weapon too, and they never said whose fingerprints those actually were. So it's just frustrating because you look at your news anchors, or you used to look at your news anchors as the people who are telling you the truth. That's why you turn them on. But nowadays, it's just like you have to do your own research. You cannot depend on these people to spoon feed you anymore.
This is the world that we live in, and you know, out of these circumstances come people like us. Because Tom Lyden isn't asking these questions here. I mean, look at how many question marks are just in these few paragraphs here. These are all questions that Tom Lyden should have asked, that any real news investigator would ask. And that's another reason why it's very important to keep this case going, is because the more that we do, the more people that take the time to really look into it do start asking these same questions. It's just natural.
Yeah, I think the last thing is the questions that should have been asked were the hard questions. Like Catherine mentioned, you get the blood writing on the wall, which appears to be written by a left-handed person, and it's using block-style uppercase letters. Then we see a note in the office written by a right-handed person in pen that's lowercase, cursive essentially, flowing letters. And then you get a text written on the computer back in all capitals once again, telling me, I have loved everyone with all my heart. And so right there should have been ample opportunity for an investigative journalist to say, well, this doesn't really, there's no consistency here. Two things are uppercase, one is lower, one is written by a right-handed person, one's by a left-handed, and one is typed. All three are different.
Yep.
So where do you, those are the hard-hitting, tough questions that we believe were never asked. And I think that all those are fair questions as well. But after a year, you could have at least had the answers. I think that's what we're expecting, is the handwriting analysis, the blood analysis, the typing analysis, the laptop, who wrote, and none of that stuff came back. There was no fingerprints on anything, which really seemed to be more shocking than anything else, the lack of fingerprints.
Because if David had done that, his prints would have been everywhere, but they couldn't find them.
His DNA would have been everywhere.
Exactly.
When did we get the DNA evidence? Was it in 2017, or do you guys remember?
I think so. I think it was.
I mean, so at this point, Was it 20? I believe it was after all of the Tom Lyden report and after the sloppumentary came out, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that, but so I don't even think at this point. I mean, and they've seen all of it, and we know that they have it for whatever reason. There was people that have like some VIP roll out the freaking red carpet service to get all the documents, to get the photos, and then taunt us with them. And then we get them, and you can clearly see none of their stories make sense.
I think it would have come out during the one of the two 480-page reports that came out with the DNA. That came out at that point.
Oh,
the documentary came out in the end of 2017, I believe.
Yes, early 2018 is when they were posted to the group. So
right, that's when it went to Netflix, I think.
Yeah, it was Deanna's right. The sloppumentary did come out sometime in 2017 because that's when I joined you guys. It was after I saw that, and I was like, "Oh no, this is not right." And so I sought you guys out. And, yeah, and I.
Yeah, it was the end of 2017 is when it first appeared, or Christmas, I think, on A&E channel, network A&E, and then it converted over to Netflix after that. But
yeah.
Continuing on. Within 48 hours of finding the bodies, did police truly believe David was guilty? There was no other suspects. The public was not in any danger. What evidence led them to rule out foul play so early into their investigation? What evidence led them to dismiss alternative conclusions? Unless this case is reopened, we may never get the answers to those questions, since the Apple Valley Police Department is no longer discussing the case. That is huge.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all can assume that, within 48 hours, that did it appear that David did it? Yes. Did it appear that he was guilty? Did they believe he was? Well, they probably did. But now we're a year later, and all the I's should have been dotted, all the T's should have been crossed, all the research, all the time it took, the months and months of finding what happened comes out, and none of the questions came out. And then we're not going to talk about this case anymore. Very strange.
Well, this goes back to when I took this case to different homicide detectives, not only in the U.S. but in different countries across the world through connections that people set me up with. And I mean, most of us, when we look at that crime scene, right away we're like, okay, there's something not right here. And even they were like, right away, I mean, without hesitation, they're like, this is triple homicide. And the only people who can't seem to figure that out is the Apple Valley Police Department. And they couldn't figure that out within 48 hours. And so, yeah, I agree with you. What Greg posted in that paragraph is just, it's huge, it's heavy, and it's, why,
I think what we get here next is Tom Lyden now becoming the mouthpiece for the Apple Valley Police Department in this investigative report, because supposedly as a non-biased group or person or entity, this is supposed to, really make the public believe, well, I guess this is right, because now we have investigative journalists saying the same thing. But this gets to be too much. Continuing on, it says, Tom Lyden began his investigative segment declaring, quote, it's important at this point to really get all the facts out on the table. I think that's the most important thing here, end quote. Mr. Lyden, if you really want to get all the facts on the table, please consider researching the numerous facts you forgot to mention.
Or the numerous facts that he embellished on.
Now that's a very interesting piece here, because he focuses on the facts, and it's interesting because at this point the Justice for David Crowley Facebook page was really focusing on the facts and ensuring and making sure that members posting on the page were not coming up with theories, we're not coming up with their opinions, we're not coming up with things that they thought. But at this point, Greg, we were really focused on make sure you speak facts only, not about what David was on, marijuana. They had a troubling marriage. There was an affair going on. All these things that kept coming up over and over and over. That they were on hallucinogens. They were taking drugs. They were going financially broke. These were things that kept coming up over and over in the months, and we had to just keep reminding folks making posts to say, talk facts only. These things may have happened, but none of these things led to the killing. It didn't have anything to do with to the murderers themselves. And so it's funny that Tom Lyden starts off by saying you got to really focus on the facts. And so they were monitoring our page, obviously, when they came up with this big statement to say, really, we don't want any conspiracy theories out there. And that's what we've been saying the whole entire time. Very interesting. Now, continuing on, it says, Chief John Reitzeigel described the Crowley family as, quote, the ideal family, seemingly, before stating he believed, quote, something went terribly wrong, end quote, inside the Crowley house. Without providing any substantial evidence as to why, Chief Reitzeigel then claimed that David Crowley snapped. It looks like David snapped, Reitzeigel told Tom Lyden, and took the lives of his wife and daughter and ultimately himself. I mean, this gets to be just over the top, I think, these statements. Thoughts on that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. From a psychological standpoint, the theory of people just snapping has been disproven over and over and over again, especially with people with a history like David, and Kamel. And we are by no means saying that they are perfect people. I mean, nobody's perfect, but David never showed any signs of being psychologically damaged, and normal people don't snap. And I really wish that term had never ever come into the public arena, because now it's used for the most ridiculous things. They have nothing to back it up, so let's fall on he snapped. Yeah, that's it, he snapped. Really? It's insane.
Well, it sounds like slander.
Yes.
To me, if I was David's family, I'd sue them for slander or something. Like, what are you guys talking about? Snaps? How? And Lyden never follows up on it. He just sits there, like, crying about it. Oh, I feel so bad. The guy doesn't care. If he cared, push the subject. You have the police chief right here. You have what a lot of us have been wanting to do: get the police chief, sit them down in a room and ask them questions. It's crazy, the questions that Tom Lyden does not ask.
Yep.
It's interesting when you watch this segment too, the face of the police chief, how red it is when he's giving these statements. He looks like the most uncomfortable person in the room answering these statements.
That's true. I just watched it like 2 weeks ago. He does
not seem comfortable at all. And it's evident that he is not a very good liar. He does not. He doesn't lie well, and he's trying to pass it off. But when you watch it, it's a dead giveaway. I'd like to say he looked to me like the face that he had looked to me like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He didn't seem comfortable at all.
He was extremely uncomfortable.
A long-tailed cat in a full of rocking chairs. Okay. I'm not touching that one.
Chief Reitzeigel also believed a great deal of the Gray State movie was the reason why David killed his wife, child, and himself. From all accounts, he says, quote, the police chief told Tom Lyden he was consumed with producing this film, and it was a dark topic. Here you're talking about conspiracy theories and potentially the fall of society. And if you're focusing on that day in and day out, and these are materials you're working with, and you're filming exclusively on that topic, that can take you to a very bad place, end quote. This is really, once again, over the top. Any comments on that one?
Yes, I would like to ask you, does that mean that every filmmaker that has made Apocalypse Now, all of these horror movies, all of these other, are they all snapping to now? Because they had to do the very same thing David had to do, day in and day out. They're all now in a dark place, killing themselves. Really? Sorry, Sophia, go ahead.
No, I was going to make the same exact point. It's like they all had to research their scripts and everything to put into the movies, and none of them snapped. None of them killed their families and wrote 3 different types of suicide notes and everything. So it's just a bunch of BS.
Yep.
Yeah, there's
And
no precedent for it. Go ahead, sir.
It ties in nicely. The other thing they're trying to do here with these statements like this is to throw the Gray State script under the bus and to throw conspiracy theorists as a whole under the bus. When the things David was writing and talking about back then are basically all coming true right now in today's world, it is very interesting how all these things they talked about are very much what we're seeing here. And David Crowley was actually ahead of his time. What was coming up, but this was used, I think, as a stunt to throw everyone under the bus. The project, David, the family, what he was doing, what he was talking about, and conspiracy theorists as a whole. So this, I don't think, came up with Wright Zeigel, just came up with this, but I think this was part of the script that was handed to him as far as bullet points that he needed to say on camera. And now the question is, who would have handed this kind of information to the chief? Who would have been forwarding this information to the chief to say, look, make sure you stress these following points? And that's what I'm getting at here when I talk about Operation Mockingbird and propaganda and how prevalent it is here in America with the news and with police departments like this. They're trying to push a narrative, and that's the question. None of this was stuff that he would have mentioned or talked about or phrases he would have said if you asked him directly. But he's painting a picture here and using bullet points to give the viewers that this was a crazy guy that indeed did snap.
And this too just goes to prove, this statement right here by the chief just goes to prove that they themselves did not investigate. Why? Because the film Gray State ended up being nothing about conspiracy. That was the direction that Danny August Mason was hoping it would go, because Danny August Mason was really into conspiracies, and he presented all this stuff to David at first, and that's kind of where the script was being written. But David said, no, I didn't even want to do this. I want to take this in a whole different direction. He rewrote the entire thing, based it on what he saw coming down the pipe from, coming down what's going to be happening in America and around the world, and he created an entirely different script. It wasn't based on conspiracies. It was based on things that were happening in the government that were not being put out or the general public wasn't seeing. So all of this, dark stuff, this conspiracy stuff, is all another lie. It's another narrative, adding to their narrative, like you were saying, Dan. And who did that and why?
Correct. And the script wasn't out at this time. So I think what they're talking about when they're talking about Gray State and the project was really, I'm guessing, that 2.5-minute trailer is what they were referring to. Correct? When they talked about the Gray State project, that's all they really had.
Yeah, but even in the trailer, there's no conspiracy. That was all stuff that if you follow what he, like the RFID chips and the, everybody being under, I mean, the book 1984, I mean, there are a lot of different books and scripts that are written with that same type of genre and way of going. And as far as I mean, that has been in the works forever. But David had gone and done research on these different topics and then was putting them in and kind of putting pieces together. And again, that just tells me they didn't research, or did they? And was it calling the conspiracy, trying to deflect, like you were saying? Did someone higher up, did they want this deflection done so the focus would be off of what was coming? Because look, we're facing this now, versus, what, in other words, to make him look like some nut job that quote unquote snapped versus someone who sees it and he's putting pieces together.
Correct.
Who would be higher? Who would be higher than the chief? I mean, because you bring up a really good question, and I'm racking my brain trying to think. Man, this guy is like the highest law enforcement officer, right? That's the chief. So, who is? If it came from somebody higher, it's like there's really not a lot of options.
Well, that's
now,
and I think
maybe.
I think that's a great point, because that's where we're after with all of this in this book. How many layers are up there that we don't know about? Now, if he's the chief, and obviously they're being manhandled by someone. Someone's the puppet master for all this. Jim Gummert, I don't think, believes David Crowley did this. John Reitzeigle, I don't think, did it. But they've got to push this narrative. And so the question is, who's feeding it? Who's funneling it? Who above them? And so when you get to the state of Minnesota, the next layer up, the Attorney General in the state of Minnesota, which was, I believe, it was Keith, maybe Ellison at the time, that's already, that position is a corrupt position already, back when this crime happened, run by and operated by deep state. Minnesota's a very deep state, once again, and the people here in the state don't realize that. They think that other states are where this corruption happens. Not here, not in the Midwest. It doesn't happen here. I've talked to people firsthand that have told me that, including law enforcement officials. These things don't happen here. Well, Keith Ellison, member himself from Mr. Muslim Brotherhood himself, has gotten to his position for certain reasons. And so that is not a good individual in the highest law enforcement position in the state. Now, those in the federal government are running those in the state government. And so we already know the federal government and the arms within are corrupt and run by deep state. I mean, this coup in America did not take place recently. This has been decades. And so this is, when Ellison leaves office, guess who takes over for him? It's Ilhan Omar. So this is how deep-rooted the state of Minnesota is with corruption in the state. So Reitzeigle, I think, was manhandled by someone, got a talking to as far as how to roll this thing out and how to portray it. He didn't have a clue, obviously, what was going on, because I think all this was over all their heads. These are pawns. And when you look at the much bigger picture, you realize very quickly that John Reitzeigle is not the leader, the top guy here in Apple Valley for the state, but he's merely a pawn being pushed around. And so, he did what he was told or instructed to do. The question is, who does it come down from? Who hands it down? Is it CIA? Is it FBI? Is it State Department? We know all three of those organizations are corrupt from what we've seen here in the last couple of years alone. The Department of Justice is corrupt. So who's really calling the shots, and who was told to make this story go away? That's the question. And that'd be the same question with Tom Lyden. Who was handing Tom Lyden the list of questions to ask for this interview? These aren't Tom Lyden's questions that he came up with, obviously. He can't be that much of an imbecile. So the question is, who handed him these softball questions? someone higher up, obviously. And so in the media, we've got the chain of command. In the government, we have the chain of command. And all the people that we've discussed here so far today on the show are all low-level feeders, low-level people that the general public thinks are very high-level. Tom Lyden, very highly respected. No, he is not anything close to that. John Reitzeigel, a high person, a high up, the police chief. No, you're still a water boy for someone higher above you that the public doesn't know about. And I think that's the most important thing to talk about in a case like this, whereas it's not as conspiracy theories, it's who's really making cover-ups like this succeed. How are cover-ups like this in the police department handled? How are they done so well? We're 6 years into this, and it's been very successful, the cover-up. But the question is, how? How can it be that successful? We already know and have proven that David didn't do this. The question then is, why are we keep getting the backlash from the people in the media and law enforcement saying that David did do it? That's, I think, the question that we're all learning by being in this justice group and following cases like this is, how are things like this pulled off? How are they successfully pulled off? A cover-up of this magnitude. So this is what we're getting on this good chapter. Greg's got a very good chapter here. Anything more on that? Tom Lyden goes on to say, quote, judging by the mail piling up and a paper in the home, the murder/suicide took place the day after Christmas. David shooting Kamel twice in the head, Rania once, before shooting himself. Between their bodies, a Quran with pages torn out, opened to a traditional forgiveness prayer, end quote. This is almost laughable. Who wants to start with the comments on this one?
Catherine, please.
Okay, go ahead, Sophia, because I don't know if I'll shut up.
No, I want you to do it.
Oh.
You're the one who did the research on this.
Yes. And I don't know if you seen the recent video I did, Dan, but all this time, I never looked at this Quran, right? I never even opened it and looked at it. I didn't even read it, the page it was on the floor, until just one day I read that report. Somebody brought it to the attention, so I pull up the supplemental report, and I'm reading it where Sidra's stating, oh yes, this is just a forgiveness prayer. And I'm like, well, let me go and read this, because I've had other people of the Muslim faith contact me and say, no, it's not. That's not it. But I never pushed it forward, because I'm like, well, okay, I don't read the language. So then I order a Quran and I start reading it. And I'm like, hold on a second. Any Nimrod, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, any Nimrod who reads that page, I'm sorry, I'm really hacked at this right now, can clearly see this is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. You have on the page, on the Quran on the floor, which wasn't between them, by the way, it was to David's left, and Kamel was to his right, so it's on David's left-hand side by his hand. Anyway, so in this open Quran, to the right of this, you have it written in Arabic. To the left, it's written in English, and down below is someone who's discussing and telling what these things mean. And so I'm like going, okay, why didn't they read this? This is clearly a story that's even in our own Bibles. That's in their Quran. How does Sodom and Gomorrah ever translate into a forgiveness prayer? So A, Sidra's freaking lying out her backside. B, the police are too damn stupid to read it. And C, Tom Lyden doesn't have the frickin' wherewithal to open up the damn book and read it himself. And this is somebody who's calling himself an investigative reporter? Okay, I told you that. This irks me, because this shows a lack of integrity, this shows a lack of professionalism, and this shows proof of narrative on their part. I'm sorry, I'm done with my rant now.
I have nothing to add.
Oh, this really gets in my craw. I mean, and to know that Sidra flat out lied I mean, it's a blatant, flat-out lie. There's nothing else you can call it. It's not a misunderstanding. It's not she didn't understand. She looked at that photograph of that Quran open and told the police it's a traditional forgiveness prayer said over the dead. I'm sorry I'm mimicking her, but someone who lies, they deserve to be mimicked because that's ridiculous. Again, I said, okay, I'm done. I have to shut up because I'm afraid I'll rip her a new one, and that's not the purpose of this chapter.
No, we'll definitely get there. There's a whole chapter on forgiveness, so I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Okay.
What do you think the purpose of trying to convince people that the forgiveness prayer was involved?
To make it look like David was saying he was sorry for killing them. Oh, please forgive me for killing my family. That's how it comes across to me. But it's a lie.
But he's a Christian,
exactly.
right? So, yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't.
Why would he
sense.
do a Muslim prayer?
And how would he know about a Muslim prayer? He never really got into that religion, not as far as we can see. So what was the purpose of that?
Well, I think the interesting thing to point out is once again we need to take a step back to look at the big picture, and then take another step back to take a much larger picture. Catherine, you mentioned the Sodom and Gomorrah, so we're getting into the sex and the inappropriate sex, and what I call by that is the non-heterosexual sex.
Uh-huh.
Now, why did I get Tom Lyden to do this story? Tom Lyden is not a straight man.
Ooh, you're right. He is. You're correct.
No one in this case is a straight person for the most part, except David and Kamel.
Right.
So there's all this connections with homosexuality in this whole case, including the investigation, including the book. It's right in our face is what's being done here. So they're really going after David, but they're getting teamed up in gang, getting piled up on. David's getting piled up on by this whole same type of a crowd, if you will. They're all ones trying to do the bidding to snuff this man out. And it all comes in a sexual nature. So why? That's the question. Why, of all the investigative journalists in the Twin Cities, was Tom Lyden selected for this? And why does he go along with the narrative, in particular this, that David did it? So we're, that book open to Sodom and Gomorrah was not by accident either. So once again, it comes back to all these the symbolism and all these things done on purpose that we're not told about. The average person is not going to look up and say, I'm going to look up this forgiveness prayer and see what it really means. The general public doesn't do that. They listen and believe what they're told by the media. So we get the answer from Catherine, who decides to, as a critical thinker, go out, order the book, get it, and start reading through this and investigate. Well, the propaganda in this nation is all built around the fact that people generally don't do that. That's why they're able to get away with telling these tall tales in all these various cases. So, Catherine, thank you for doing that, because now we're getting much closer to the bigger picture, I think.
Yeah, and I kicked myself too, and I even stated in the video, I did, and I'm just as guilty. I took them at their word. I took Sidra at her word, because I was like, why would I doubt what she had to say? Until, I got it and just started reading it. And then all of a sudden, I'm telling you, I'm like, well, wait a second. I know this story. This is in Genesis in our Bible. And then, wait a second, this is about destroying people who are wicked. This is Bible talking. I'm just quoting scripture here so people don't go off on me on this. But in both the Quran and the Bible, it talks about destroying the homosexual behavior in communities of both Sodom and Gomorrah. So, but why? You're right. I didn't even stop to think about why would that have been, and it was opened on purpose and left there. Why would that be left on their floor when they're the only two straight people amongst all their friends?
It's all staged. Now, continuing with the next section, it says, Chief Breitzeigel told Tom Lyden that David Crowley used Komel's blood to write Allahu Akbar at the top of the living room wall, close to a clock mounted on the wall. The police chief did not specify what evidence tied David to the blood writing, and it's unclear if Tom Lyden bothered to ask that question. Asked why he believed David wrote the words in his wife's blood, the chief responded, quote, "We believe that was kind of a parting shot, probably at Comel for having a Muslim past," end quote. Now this is another paragraph that's loaded with juicy details. Number one, we don't know that David Crowley wrote anything on blood. We do know that it's Comel's blood that was used on that wall, but there is no fingerprints or nothing to show that David Crowley wrote it. But that's just a given here, the way that it's questioned to Tom Lyden. That's a given. Well, that's not a given. That should be his first question to ask, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Going on, it says, quote, "This has nothing to do with Islam," end quote. Mason Hendricks told Tom Lyden separately. It had everything to do with a man that lost his way and ultimately killed his wife and his daughter and then himself. Hendricks thought David was being sarcastic when he wrote Allahu Akbar in Comel's blood. Quote, "That's him possibly throwing a jab." A jab at Comel's family? Lyden asked. Possibly. Yet this has nothing to do with Islam? David did not kill himself right away, Tom Lyden reported. He left a trail of footprints, tracking Comel's blood through the house. In the living room, his bloody fingerprint is on a laptop, open to a text file, with only a single sentence that says, "I have loved you all with all of my heart." In the home office on a notepad, more bloody fingerprints. And now the words, "Submit to Allah now," end quote. The comments there, should I continue with the next one?
It's just all slander. It's all propaganda. It has nothing to do with Muslims, but yet everything that we're seeing here that they're talking about has to do with Muslims. You have Mason Hendricks saying that it was possibly David throwing a jab, which is pretty much what the chief is saying. I mean, Hendricks and the chief are pretty much saying the same thing. That's why I wanted to put those two quotes in there closely. It's a parting shot. Is what the chief says, and Hendricks adds. It's possibly him throwing a jab. It's everything that you just read there that they said is not true. Just about everything is not true, or it's pure speculation. It's propaganda. It is meant for the weak-minded people. It is really meant for people who want to believe David Crowley is guilty, for them to just write this case off and to move on to some other case.
How about the phrase, "He left a trail of footprints," plural, a trail through the house? Any comment, Catherine?
That's a Hendricks quote, too, by the way. Go ahead.
I would really like to, I have a lot to say about, because I don't believe their footprints to begin with, but I would really like to have, if it's okay, Sophia, because this is what Sophia was talking about earlier. Are you there, Sophia?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Go for it, girl.
We know that this isn't true. There was only like 2.5 footprint type imprints on the wooden floor over by the island, and it's not throughout the house like they were saying. This is just pure embellishment and slander. They're making it look like David was just wandering through the house with blood on his feet, which, by the way, if you've ever tried to walk with blood on your feet or wet paint on your feet, it's almost impossible. You're slipping, you're sliding, you lose your balance very easily, and it's just not easy to do. So this is just all more BS.
Yeah, and having them say that they were throughout the house when all these pretend kindergarten paint jobs are done is like straight in front of the computer, nothing leading up to, nothing going away, not even when they sprayed the floor. did it bring out, when they used the immunoblack, it didn't bring out any prints anywhere else except for right there. Oh, really? So where did that blood come from? How did it get there? So you jump over there, walk on his heels? I mean, it's just ludicrous.
And it only looks like it's 1 foot. I think it looks like the right foot, but it's not like, it's not even 2 feet. Even if you believe that it's feet, it's just 1 foot. No, not buying it. And then, this is all slander. His bloody fingerprint is on the laptop. That's not true. There are fingerprints. Somebody's bloody fingerprints are on there. They can't tie that to David. They should know that by now. Tom Lyden should know that by now. He should be calling them on this stuff. But yet he's just spouting what they tell him, which is what a lot of people who have faded off in this case, that's what they did. But it's just, do you want to believe that David Crowley is guilty? If you do, then don't waste any more time. Just listen to whatever Tom Lyden says and watch the slot-documentary, and that's it, But real people are not falling for that. And if you have fallen for that, it's time to take a second look. Go back and actually look at what they're saying and compare that to what the documents say. I know it takes time. We try to make it as easy for you as possible to do it yourself. It's not about us shaming you because you are wrong. It's just about finding what the truth is here. That's it.
And he also goes, I think the other thing is the photos. There's 460, I think, photos of every square inch of that house, essentially. And one can see for yourself that there's no bloody footprints anywhere except for those 2, whatever they are, by the kitchen island. But there's no tracks through the house. There's no blood. There's no bloody footprints throughout the house. There isn't any bloody footprints anywhere.
Right.
And then the other thing is, because David was not wearing socks and shoes, he was barefoot. They attributed the blood to his feet, but his feet were never tested nor confirmed that blood were ever on his feet, ever. That's a major point, major question. If I was Tom Lyden,
yes,
to ask if there was footprints all through the house, did the tests on David's feet conclude that Kamel's blood was all over David's feet, both of them? Well, the question was never asked. That, to me, would be a fair question.
And in the autopsy, the coroner even made a comment about David's toenails being clean and neat. If he had been walking through the house in blood, the blood definitely would have been underneath his toenails and in the cuticle area. And there's no mention of that at all.
Any final words here, and we'll go ahead and shut this episode down?
Nothing more for me.
Well, I would just kind of, Sophia or Catherine, any final words?
No, none for me.
No.
I would just hope that everybody looks at these documents, looks at what these people are saying, come to your own conclusion. Is this case really closed?
All right, testing out a new headset here. We'll see how it sounds, and if it doesn't sound good, we won't use it again. Greetings. So I hope you enjoyed that first show on Tom Lyden. That would be part 1 of a 2-part special. This is from obviously from my book, The Gray Stage, and that was the first part of the Tom Lyden section of the chapter Closing the Case, which pretty much should have been the end of the whole book, and it should have ended with, well, here's what proves David Crowley guilty, right? That was pretty much the whole point of the book, and pretty much the whole point of the research and following this case. And of course, little spoiler alert, if you do not know, then you should definitely know now that what we have discovered is that there is no evidence that proves David Crowley guilty. And what we also discovered is that the authorities and news peoples like Tom Lyden still run with the theory that, well, David is guilty. And so that was a little frustrating, obviously, for many reasons. I'm sure for all the people that were hanging on the edge of their seat and waiting to find out, okay, the authorities say David Crowley is guilty. They must have something, right? They must have the big smoking gun. They must have the conclusive evidence that shows it. And by the end, it's like watching a bad movie and you're like left with all of these questions. Like, what? Okay, where's the rest of this movie here? And so that's what the book pretty much was designed to do, was to put all of the things forth that they had said, everything that they would show that would close the case, and then to take it to the next step, which obviously shows that the case is not closed, and there's still some lingering questions, and there's still a lot of things that still need to be answered, to be investigated. But the biggest takeaway for anybody reading the book, reading this chapter, reading any of this stuff here is, yeah, there's nothing proves David Crowley guilty. That is the case closed. That is the closing of this case, because that, in the end, is what really happened. That is the real truth here. We're gonna, we talked about last month the case was ruled exceptionally cleared, and then kind of went through all the things where they tried to show, they're trying to kind of, it's like a wordplay, I guess, using the word exceptionally cleared. And somehow that means David Crowley is guilty, but obviously, as we covered last month, not the case at all. And then you have guys like Tom Lyden who pick up that water and just keep running with it, right? They pick up the baton of these lies and these the allegations and the theories, the fake theories, and just run with it and just go with it. It's like, you're not an investigative journalist if you're doing that. An investigative journalist would investigate and would not just run with, well, hey, this is what they think, and that's pretty much it. Especially a guy like Tom Lyden, who definitely knows better than to do something like that. I mean, we all know better than that. The police know better too. I mean, come on. And again, we can't blame all of the police. I can't get into their head and figure out which police think that David is innocent. I just don't really want to say anything, and which police really, truly, sincerely believe that David Crowley is guilty. I think you would be hard-pressed to find police that really, truly believe David Crowley is guilty. And so in the Tom Lyden interview that he does with the police, please watch that. It's about 20 minutes. I know for some people, if it's for Sophia and other people, it's hard to watch, but it's definitely worth watching. And it is just like a Babylon Bee story where these guys are just, we believe, well, takes you here and it's going to take you here and you're going to snap and this and that. It's just so ridiculous. I mean, it is really laughable. But it is like a Babylon Bee. It's like watching a satire thing, 20 minutes of satire. And then, of course, at the end, they have to, throw in, well, the family and friends are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be attacked by conspiracy theorists. It's just so ridiculous. It really is. I mean, I know I shouldn't be laughing at it. This is a very serious case, but the Tom Lyden stuff is just so ridiculous. I mean, if you don't laugh, you're gonna lose some hair. It's gonna shave a couple years off of your life, and you'll get some gray hairs like I got here hidden. But I don't know what else to really say about it. It is just some of the most ridiculous, quote-unquote, reporting, if you can call it that I've seen. And you look at Tom Lyden's face, and he just looks so serious there, like he really gives a shit, like he really believes this cat crap. No, man, sorry, I'm just not buying it. I'm just not buying it. It's hard to buy anything. I had never heard of Tom Lyden before that. I've learned some things after that I probably don't want to mention here. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that first part. Next month we'll come back and do the second part. So October 1st, within a few days, that's when the podcast will be out. You've already seen this one by then. November 1st will be part 2 of the Tom Lyden. We'll go through the final part of the closing the case chapter of my book, The Gray Stage by Greg Fernandez Jr. And then we'll move on to the 21 questions for Detective Gummert. So the due diligence that you'll see there, based on what little we actually knew and what little documents we had at that time. We didn't have any of the BCA stuff. We didn't really have a whole lot of stuff. All that we really had was the 94 pages, the 464 photos. May have had the BCA 711 photos maybe by that time. I don't think so. I really don't think we had that's pretty much it, right? If you were to put in a FOIA request, they call it a data request with the Apple Valley Police. If you put one in right now and pay $5, you will get the 94 pages, you will get 464 photos, and that's it. That's it. And then all of a sudden, years later, there's all this new data, all this other stuff. Like, whoa, okay, where'd this stuff come from? All right, great. We have it, we need it. It's very relevant to this case because we know that the more documents they give us, the more that it mounts to show that they don't really have anything that proves David Crowley guilty. And so the distractions, the takeaway from all of that to try to get you to focus on other things, pay no attention to the man behind that curtain, just look over here. It's not working. It's not going to work. It's never worked on people. So we'll just continue on, and we'll continue to discuss the evidence, the facts of this case, and that's what the podcast is. That's what the book is. And as we know, there's other stuff that came out after the book came out, so there's still a lot more stuff that needs to be added to paper form. So we'll figure out what the best way is to do that as well. New photos, right? The autopsy photo, or not, I wouldn't call them autopsy photos exactly, but they are photos from the medical examiners of the clothing and of the tattoos that are on the bodies. So, you get some body photos, I guess. There, I don't know why those were released at all to some people, including Tony Floyd. Same thing with the BCA, the 13-minute BCA video. Why that was released to Tony Floyd as well, when we haven't been able to get any. Maybe we just weren't asking the right questions. That's highly possible too, But we have put in requests, and if we don't get those, the same thing that Tony Floyd got, we're going to put in a request to specifically ask for those things in a nice, polite, respectful way. Is always the best way, right? That's always the best way. Not to be rude, not to be angry, or how come they got it but we didn't. It's like, hey, this is out there, it's on a public website. I just want to make sure that we get this stuff too. I think that's only fair, right? I think that's logical. I think that's a fair question to ask. So we'll see how far we get with all that. But yeah, in the meantime, I don't know. I know we've talked about doing kind of a special, maybe mid-month, and really looking at Tom Lyden's 20-minute news report. If we can get through it, we'll see how far we get. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening, for watching the Gray Stage podcast. This was episode number 21, Tom Lyden part 1, and we'll come back on November 1st to discuss Tom Lyden part 2. God bless you all. Until then.